everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the president and CEO now of Universal Classics, and the office is in New York, but I'm actually a proud Miami Beach resident. And when I moved down here about 12 years ago, I won't bore you with the details, but there are a lot of people in this room tonight, Paul Lear being the very important one of them, and also Shelley Berg is here tonight. And I can't begin to tell you what an amazing place, well, you all know, but coming from New York and from the classical music and classics business, there is no city like Miami for the excitement and the participation of extraordinarily talented youth in classical music than here in Miami with YoungArts, Frost School of Music, the New World. It's an extraordinary city. So I consider myself very privileged to live here, and I feel very lucky to have been invited tonight by Paul to moderate this. Needless to say, having worked with Joshua Bell for close on many years, I knew him, well, okay, we won't go back that far. Because I am the head of Universal Classics here, and Joshua still, alas, records for Sony, you can know that I'm being extremely and completely objective when I say there is no greater classical music artist out there on the stage today than Joshua Bell. So I feel incredibly privileged to be able to share the stage with Joshua again.
On this stage.
Yeah, I mean, Carnegie Hall, that's a long story, but yeah.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I feel like you've heard me speak enough, but I'm happy to be here, and so nice. We did, Elizabeth and I did work together since you were in your early 20s. That's all I'll say.
No more dates.
And so it's really nice to see you.
That's great. So Josh, when you're the manager of an artist who is as successful as someone like Joshua Bell, a lot of your time is spent saying no. More of your time is spent saying no than saying yes. And if I had to tally all the time that I spent saying no, the no's were frequently to people who said, could we get Joshua Bell to do a masterclass for our music school? And your answer was always, no, I don't do master classes.
That was the only time I ever said no, I think, to anything since you were working. I tend to say yes.
Joshua's like nature. He abhors a vacuum in his schedule. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why we're talking about a master class.
Yeah, master class is just the traditional term of master class, of teaching someone in front of an audience. It never really appealed to me. I've done it a few times and sometimes enjoyed it, but I love the interaction, either one-on-one or working together on something. But when you have to worry about the audience and make a show for them while you're teaching, it's just not something that I like to do that much. I love working just without an audience. But when they came to me from HBO and they said masterclass, and I go, oh boy, there's that word again. I asked, does it have to be a traditional masterclass? And they were very open to different formats. So we came up with this way, which was so much fun. For me, you guys were great, by the way. That was really
bravo,
nice.
Bravo.
Yeah, this is I think, if I think of my own experiences and what I've learned in my life, I played for many master classes, various people, but the times that I learned the most were actually from playing with people, going to Marlborough Music retreat where they put me together with members of the Guarneri String Quartet or Rudolf Serkin, who was 80 years old when I was 17, getting to work with these people on music. That's where I felt I learned the most. As throughout my life, it's always been in those sort of experiences. So I thought this way maybe it would be most conducive to learning, for all of us.
And so what was the process in terms of putting this whole show together? I mean, how were you kind of deciding with whom and how and where to go? Were you driving that, or how was it happening?
A little bit. I mean, we had discussions as to what would be fun. I suggested my place in New York, because that way I wouldn't have to travel anywhere. And I actually do put on concerts in my house, which you've been to many of them. I sort of built that space so I could have concerts in the house. So I thought it'd be fun to do that. And I just happened to have been going to London around that time to make this album. So I thought we could tie it all together with playing Bach and during my album, and so yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, your apartment, which is extraordinary, and that very intimate space, and the whole idea of salon. I mean, I know that's something you grew up with your family, your parents, and everything. And even I think we're seeing that in the sort of. There's a certain zeitgeist in the classical music world now that a lot of the younger generation are preferring more intimate spaces because they want a more intimate experience with music. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about like why that more intimate experience as opposed to a concert hall.
I think, well, if you ask any classical musician if they'd rather play chamber music like the pieces we play for a small group like this, or for 3,000 people in a huge hall, they would always choose the smaller venue, because it's just somehow feels right. For listening to classical music, if you feel immersed in it, it's just, as a listener, I think it's fantastic. This music, for instance, the Mendelssohn piece, which we're going to play a little bit from tonight as well, that was written during the time in the 19th century where playing classical music in the home, that's where most people heard the music. They didn't have recordings. And some people could go to concerts, but most people played the music in their home, and including Mendelssohn and his sister, Fanny Mendelssohn. They would have musicales in their house, and this was such a normal sort of thing. And it's wonderful. The salon idea sort of has kind of faded a bit, but I like to see that it's come back a bit. A lot of classical musicians are playing in unusual places like Joe's Pub in New York and other sort of more intimate venues. There's even an opera company in New York now called Loft Opera, which puts on operas inside people's lofts. I did one in my apartment as well, and it's a wonderful way to experience music.
I mean, could you see the whole trend of classical music going to a more? You think it's possible that we might go back to?
Maybe. It's just nice to have. I mean, I like both. Obviously, I love playing at Carnegie Hall, but it's nice to have both. And now with technology, I did a concert for my holiday album, which was called Musical Gifts on Sony.
How did it sell?
Well, let's see. My mother bought one, but we did.
I downloaded it.
we did a concert from my house, which was broadcast on the internet. I think we had 10,000 people listen to it live, and then many others after. There's on Medici TV, which is a really cool website that does really high quality broadcasts of concerts. So I mean, that's sort of a wave of the future as well.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit, just as you were growing up, and I've heard you tell the stories about sort of like salons or house concert or music house, whatever, in your own home with your family and everything, and that's obviously such an important experience and one that, alas, I think we're lacking a little bit today. But the other thing that I'd love to hear you talk about a little bit and to share with the audience is just your relationship with Joseph Gingold, who was such a unique person and at that time and for all time. So maybe you could talk.
Well, those are two different things. I think I feel very, very lucky that I did grow up in a very musical household and parents that loved music. They're not professional musicians, but every cousin of mine, my sisters, my parents, they all played music. So I grew up, music was such an important part of what it was to be alive and to be a human being. I wish every kid had that, and I think that's why we need more music in the school, and more music in the home. Anything that can get young people it doesn't matter whether they become professionals. Just having music is such an enriching thing for young people. And then for the ones that do very well at it and start having aspirations to be professional, that's where Young Arts comes in and identifies them and rewards them, and that's so important at that level for those, because many of these people come from families who think the only way to make a living is from being a doctor or being in business, because that's, and being an artist, what is that? That's a hobby. Young Arts comes in and gives them the encouragement, and I think it's very important to have to attack this on multiple levels. The basic level for kids and in the schools, and then having. I love the philosophy of Young Arts that really just finds the great talents around the country.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about Young Arts, I mean, even before I think it was before I even knew Paul and before this building and everything, I remember going to my first Young Arts gala and watching the performance where, the alum from, so many different genres came together, and there was this extraordinary sort of extravaganza involving all musicians and dancers and visual artists, and it was quite extraordinary, because it's hard to do that with it's hard to do that, period. And it was so extraordinarily well done. Josh, one of the great pleasures in working with you was always that you're one of the great classical instrumentalists, great artist, great musician, but one of the things I always loved was your intellectual curiosity and the fact that you're always looking around. And not only were you the first person to start asking the record company about their marketing plan and why this and why not, and have you thought about this and have you thought about that, but you're also somebody who's constantly you're hungry to know about different genres and different artists, and you're always looking to collaborate. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the importance of collaboration in your development as an artist and just in general.
Well, I mean, I just like to be around as many interesting people as I can. I mean, it's pretty simple, and a lot of those interesting people are in other fields. Whether it's I've gotten to play at the math or the World Science Festival, mm-hmm. with Brian Greene, who's the string theorist, and we put together something. Just getting to be around people like that, or Meryl Streep, or people like that doing films. It's just it's so inspiring, and then in the music world, I've learned as much from Edgar Meyer, who used to work for, the great double bass player, bluegrass musician. I learned so much from playing with him in his world, and playing with jazz artists like Chick Corea, who is I think you're associated with, you guys too. Playing with people like him and Branford Marsalis, and I just learned as much from them as I have from classical artists. So I think just in general, as an artist, you're always a student. And I think you always have to have that attitude that you're always learning and looking to learn, because once you stop doing that, you kind of shrivel up, and you may still make money if you've got a big name, but I think the art suffers if you're not really always exploring, and I think it's really important.
Oh, and that's one of the things that made you so great to work with.
Not dead yet.
I know. Sony, well. I'm thinking about these guys over here and thinking, that they're embarking upon careers. And, I know those of us who've been in the business for a long time, there are a lot of naysayers. And I believe there's even a tea party of classical music right now. No, I'm convinced there's a tea party of classical music. They have a litmus test of purity for intent and implementation, if you haven't gone to the slip disc,
Was it a litmus test or a Lipton test?
I could go either way.
The tea party. It was a bad.
Okay, we're not going to talk about your puns.
Let's not talk about politics either.
We're not going to talk about puns. But I just wondered if, when I went over went to Universal, and a lot of people thought I was going to the dark side, from management to record company. It's like one dark to another dark, whatever. A lot of people say, why would you do this? Because the record business is going to hell in a handbasket. And actually, I don't believe that, and I don't believe our business is I think there are a lot of changes happening right now. But one of the things that encouraged me to make this leap was, as I'd spent time at Young Arts and on the campus of the Frost School of Music and many other music campuses and conservatories, one of the things that I was really excited about was like this generation of musicians don't have the same sense of silos and obstacles. I mean, they're living in the technology age that we've only adapted recently, and they're not cowed by it. They're just kind of creating their own new paradigm. And I wondered if you had some thoughts about that and thoughts for them going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always exciting for me to be around younger people because of that. I mean, from an artistic level as well. When I work with a major orchestra playing the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, they've done it 1,000 times, and they look sometimes, sadly, sort of bored. I once played with a very major, one of the big 5 orchestras, and I was playing the Mendelssohn Concerto, and they were doing some bowings that were not what Mendelssohn wrote, but that they've been doing for 100 years, because that's the way somebody in 1905 put it in the music. And I said, would you mind if we take a look at what Mendelssohn was? And there's this old guy, sadly to say, 75 or so old guy in the orchestra said, "Come on, we can play this in our sleep." And I was so mad. I said, "That's exactly what it sounds like." I haven't been back to that.
And that's why we love Joshua Bell.
So it's always nice to be around young people who just think anything is possible. It's still, they're excited about what they're doing, and then with the new technology and they're open to, on their iPods. A lot of the younger generation, they've got rock music and jazz and classical, and it's all music, and that's because that's what we can do now, and I think it's fantastic. So it's very. I'm optimistic about the future. I don't know about the recording companies, but I think that
very
about
optimistic.
The classical music world. I think they've been saying for hundreds of years. They've been saying, well, it's where's the audience going to be? And they're always surprised when somebody replaces that older audience. But I think. I'm very optimistic about the future. I see so many young people playing music, coming to concerts, and it's a good time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel in a way more energy and optimism than ever. So,
Good.
I think we've got a few more minutes before we're going to go into the next phase. So we wanted to open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions for Joshua? Very shy group. I mean,
Joshua, congratulations on all your marks. Thank you. Is there a moment that you consider to be the most precious when you've been performing, and then on the other hand, which one has been the most challenging?
Most precious moments. Wow. I mean, there are a few moments that stand out for me just as milestones in my life. When I was 14 years old, playing with the Philadelphia Orchestra for the first time with a major orchestra, with Riccardo Muti, and playing a Mozart concerto and hearing a great orchestra. And I was still naive enough not to realize they were cynical at that time, probably, because I was just dissing the big orchestras a minute ago. But this was one of the great experiences of my life, playing with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And from that concert, actually, that's where Charlie Hamlin, your boss, a long time ago, he had heard me there, and that started my whole career. So that was a very special moment, playing in Carnegie Hall for the first time when I was 17 years old. But there have been so many other moments, some of the highlights that would not be sort of milestones, but just moments playing chamber music with good friends like Stephen Isserlis and others that I play with, where something really magical happens on stage and you just feel like I have the absolute best job in the world. Like there's just nothing better than being a performing artist, and the thrill and it just stimulates on every single level, and so I feel very lucky and excited about our friends here, that they're all in this field with me, and I think you couldn't have chosen a better field.
And the challenges?
The challenges, I mean, they're constant challenges. I don't like to dwell on it. There's kind of a stereotypical cliche answer that the concert performer says, say, where do you live? Well, I live on planes, I live at United Airlines, this is where I live, yes, I travel a lot. And that's not always easy, but really it's an easy trade for the rewards. And and the stress, a lot of stress, but I think that's also the thing I like about it as well, is the stress and the tension, and then the relief when it's over, or when it's or even when it's happening. But so there are challenges, but I'm not going to sit here and complain about it.
Anybody else?
I wanted to ask you about competitions. How important are they, and do you think they always choose the best artists?
Do competitions, have you not seen Dancing with the Stars? Do they ever pick the best person? Oh, good. Okay. That's a different show. They're always right. No, competitions, funny enough, I mean, they very often I find they do not pick the best one, but often that's because some of the most interesting artists don't do well in competitions, because they average out the scores. So you'll have one judge who just loves them, another one that's offended by their maybe slightly unorthodox approach, and they'll mark them lower, and they'll end up with an average score. Whereas someone that's sort of inoffensive, might get a slightly higher score across the board. So that does happen. Sometimes there's someone that stands out that's so clearly better than the others, and they win, and that's awesome when that happens. But anybody who goes into a competition cannot go in there saying, if I don't win, I'm gonna, it's because you have to go into it for the experience. It's a great goal. I think we need goals to do what we do. Always setting goals, and a competition is a nice way to kind of have something to shoot for and practice for. So I believe in them, but I did a few of them when I was very young. But luckily I started a career before I was old enough to do the international competitions, and I avoided that scene, and I'm very happy that I didn't have to do that. But and it's not quite the same as it used to be, as far as, in the old days, when somebody won the Tchaikovsky competition, it was really big news in the music world, and everybody would know who that is. Now I can't name the last winners of the Van Cliburn or the Tchaikovsky, or even it doesn't have quite the, and many of the great artists have not won big competitions. But if you approach it with the right philosophy, there's nothing wrong with it.
Certainly not a gateway to a career, though.
Not quite the same as it used to be. But my philosophy about that is that careers is that there's not one way to have a career. When I was younger, everyone told me, you have to move to New York, you have to study with Dorothy DeLay at Juilliard, and she'll get you a record contract, and you have to win an international competition, and then you'll have a career. And I chose something different. I loved my teacher, Joseph Gingold. I stayed with him at Indiana University. At one point, I was sort of courted by Hamlin Landau, which was your management, and ICM, which was the really big one, and I really loved Charlie Hamlin. Personally, I felt that he would take better care of me, and I went with the smaller management, and ended up being, I think, the best decision I ever made. So I sort of did not go the normal route. Which is why my first time I played in Carnegie Hall, the reviewer was kind of condescending and said, "The boy from Indiana came on stage at Carnegie Hall." He kind of referred to me that way, but whatever. I've done okay.
I'm not going to comment on that. There are too many stories. Back there? Go ahead.
I heard your story, and I know you were very fortunate when you were young. But what are the hopes for kids who are not that fortunate to have resources, not enough money to pay for classes?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't, for young people, if you're talking about resources, it's difficult. Obviously, it takes it takes resources to study your music, to get an instrument, and all those things. But you have to be, first of all, for parents, have to be the big advocate for their children, number one, because the children don't always know where to go and what to do, and the parents have to really be on top of it to find a good teacher, the right teacher for their child, someone that's going to inspire them. And then if the parents don't have money, there are also other ways. I mean, when I was 10, there was a violin that I just loved. I found it in New York. It was $4,000 for a violin, which at that time, for a 3/4 size violin, my parents couldn't afford. Although I think they could have. I'm still annoyed that they wouldn't buy it for me. But they went out and found somebody that was interested in sponsoring, and he bought me a violin to use. And I think there are many people out there that really love to help young people in some way, and you have to find those places, either scholarships or individuals. Just have chutzpah and ask and say, you know, I love what I'm doing, and I need a little help. Now we've got things like Kickstarter and all kinds of fun other ways as well. So it's I'm not going to say it's easy, but I think there are a lot of ways to do it.
One more question. Yep.
Hi. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you so much for being here with us. It really is an honor to be in your presence. But
Thank you.
it really seems like you've just been living the dream and you've had so many successes. Are there still things that you're like, I want to do that, and you still have goals and dreams of like big things that you still want to do with your career?
Oh yeah, lots of things. I mean, there's so many things in a classical world. I feel like I'm just like I'm just beginning in a way. I mean, I'm sure I've done a lot of things with the solo violin things, but there's so much more that I would like to do. I just don't have time to do. I'm trying to find time. Right now, I'm getting into conducting and directing. I'm now the music director of the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, and in London, and so I'm doing that. Now I get to explore all these symphonies and recording the Beethoven symphonies, and that's a whole ocean of things that I have yet to explore. Also composing, which I'd like to do much more, which I haven't done. And then there are so many artists, and there's just so much to do. So I never feel like, oh, there's nothing to do anymore. So yeah.
So I think we don't have time to take any more questions. And when I watched the show, of course, we've been talking about Young Arts, we've been talking about Joshua Bell, but we haven't been talking about the co-stars of the show, which are all of you magnificent musicians over here. You are absolutely amazing. So why don't we give you a chance to come up here and let's hear some music.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to play a sampling from the two big pieces that we did on the HBO special. We have not seen each other since we did this. How many? 5 months ago. 5 months ago. So we just all came today. So it'll be fun to do this again. We're going to start with just the last movement of the Bach A minor violin concerto, and you will recognize some of it from the episode. it's always nice to play Mendelssohn with Bach because Mendelssohn was Bach's greatest admirer and proponent. When Mendelssohn was very young in the 1820s, Bach was sort of somewhat obscure to the general public at that time, and Mendelssohn really discovered so much of Bach and sort of went into Leipzig and found all this piles of music from Bach and was just blown away by it, and he sort of brought it to light, like St. Matthew Passion and all these great pieces. So Mendelssohn loved Bach, and so we're going to play something that from the octet, which Mendelssohn, as I mentioned in the thing, he wrote when he was 16 years old, and he happened to have written one of the greatest pieces, chamber music pieces of all time. We're gonna play the first and last movements of the Mendelssohn octet. Thank you.